Hi everyone, this is Natalie with Champion of Coins Tarot. I hope that you are doing very well today. I wanted to come on to film a video response to Mixtress Rae's invitations to a tarot practice. I really enjoyed Mixtress's original video, and then I saw that Kaluna did a video response a few days ago, and I absolutely loved seeing her deck storage method as well, and the microenvironments and the crystals and the smells and the herbs that she associates with everything in her collection. I thought it was really great. And it inspired me to come on and to share a window into my own practice and the sensory experiences, the kinds of storage methods and ritual tools that I use in my own personal practice. I will give the disclaimer that I am incredibly minimalist in my approach. I wasn't always, when I first started reading tarot, having the candles going, having the incense, having a crystal for every particular deck was very important to me. However, as I've gotten older, and honestly, as my tarot collection has grown, I found that having those extra layers have hindered me more than they have helped me in terms of keeping my decks accessible and also in terms of being able to freely approach tarot. I'm somebody who will draw cards all over my apartment. We'll get to that a little bit later. But I'm somebody who will read tarot on the couch, in bed, on the floor, on the kitchen counter. It doesn't matter where I am or what tools I have around with me. What matters is that I am getting the message that I need at that particular point in my day. So this is not going to be nearly as elaborate as some of the things that other folks have shared, but I do think it's really interesting and I wanted to be part of the fun. So I will leave a link down below to both Mixtress Rae and Kaluna's channels. Highly recommend them. They are absolutely amazing creators. And I will also leave the questions down below if you would also like to participate and to share some of the aspects of your own tarot rituals. So without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get into the questions. There are 6 of them, and they largely encompass different aspects from setting up for a tarot reading all the way through to actually laying out the cards. So the first question is, what are your favorite deck housings? Box, bag, other type of box, etc. And how do you store your decks? In a drawer, box, shelf, or etc. I usually keep my decks in their original boxes. I think that's fine for long-term storage. I have had a few issues, with the paper boxes developing wear over time. For example, I've had my copy of the Hardy Tarot since 2016, and the corners are definitely worn down. I have traveled with this deck quite extensively though, so I think part of that is to be expected. But as another point of comparison here, I have the box for the Tarot of Loca by Lo Scarabeo, which also has like a little bit of wear. I got it the same time, summer of 2016, and it is in much better condition because this one doesn't really go out with me very much. So your mileage may vary. For me, I'm somebody who my favorite decks will go with me, and those are the boxes that get destroyed. But for the most part, I find that that kind of storage is fine. There are some decks though that I have either had to get rid of the boxes because they were not sustainable, or I purchased decks secondhand and they didn't come with boxes. And for a while I was using these kind of cheap velvet tarot pouches that you can get off of Amazon with the drawstring. But as you can see, there is no drawstring here anymore. I just never had good luck. I always find that within the first year, the drawstrings are the first thing to go, and then they really just become kind of a cloth covering for the cards more than anything else. So I am much more precious about the decks that live in these kinds of bags. One bag type that I have been experimenting with and that I do really like are the kind of leather tarot rolls. Like they have like these very, very long fabric flaps. but these are from the Prisma Visions Kickstarter, and they have like this really beautiful embossing on the leather, and then a pouch that is large enough to hold most standard sized mass market Oracle decks. So this has been a really great solution. I've been keeping my Fallen Angels Oracle in here, and I have a few other ones from the Kickstarter that I think I'm going to start migrating other decks of that size into, as I need to invest in new storage situations. As far as where the decks live when they are not in use, I have a really beautiful antique cherry wood desk with a green glass top in my office. And I'm not going to show you that right now because my office is a little bit of a mess. I really need to deep clean my apartment, you guys. But I will show that to you someday. Basically, it has these really deep craftsman's style drawers that you can pull out, and the bottom ones are big enough to hold the Schiffer and Llewellyn big boxes, and then the smaller ones are the perfect amount of size to stack up a low Scarabeo size or kind of an indie box size deck in. And I have plenty of room left over. I haven't even filled up the desk yet, so that's been really great. Question 2. How important are card backings to you? What type of card backings do you prefer? I really don't have a preference when it comes to card backing. I don't think of them that often, to be honest. I will say I do like card backings that are reversible. So I'm gonna grab just some examples here from around the table, like the Babylonian Tarot. You know, you have the mirrored image from the Gate of Ishtar, which is great. The Daniloff Tarot, this is definitely a much more detailed illustrative back that's in keeping with the style of the deck itself, but also fully reversible, really great. One that's not reversible, but that works because it keeps those principles of design is the Sacred Rose Tarot. Yeah, again, this is one that's like really cohesive with the art style overall of the deck. So I guess those would be my favorites, but again, card back is not going to deter me. As an example of a card back that I don't particularly like, I have here a card from the 25th anniversary edition of the Enchanted Tarot. This does not match the vibe of the artwork at all. It is beautiful, but you know, it doesn't go aesthetically. But it's not enough to prevent me from using and loving this deck, which I use quite frequently. Question 3. Do you like edging your decks? What kind of edgings do you like? I do enjoy the process of edging my decks. I find it to be very meditative, and I really only reserved edging decks for some of my absolute favorites or for decks that I have trimmed and modified to better suit the size of my hands. So examples of ones that I've done, I'm gonna go ahead and pull out the Hardy Tarot itself. This was done in black Sharpie, and it's not the best edging job, partially because I use this deck very frequently and it's kind of worn off a little bit. Also because I just didn't do a great job with it the first time around. So this is one that does definitely need a touch up, but you know, it's black, it matches both the backing and then the black borders that are around these card images. And then one that I did a few nights ago is the Mythical Goddess Tarot. And this one I edged in a Prisma color marker. This is the golden ochre color that I believe comes with their mid-tone pack. And again, it matches the very bright gold colors that are on a lot of the cards. And then also, of course, this really lovely image of the women on the back. I will say though, this cardstock is not the best. It's very thick, almost cardboard thick, and you can definitely see where some of the edges were not cut properly. And so if you're looking at it straight on from the side, you can see the colors of the borders peeking through a little bit because they're thicker than the edge of the card. But then if you were to look at it from an angle like this, it really blends in very well, again, with that gold color in the artwork. So quite like that. And then I do have a few that I've edged in a metallic Tim Holtz ink pad. So an example here is the Mary L. Tarot, which I did trim down. This was the really big first edition that was just absolutely massive. So I trimmed those to be kind of more of a rectangular size, and then used that metallic ink pad, and that's held up very, very well over the years. So those three, Sharpie, Prismacolor, Tim Holtz, are my favorite tools to use when edging decks, and I'm likely to do more in the future. The only thing that's limiting me are some of the colors that are available on the market. If I had a marker or an ink pad for every single deck in my collection, then they would probably all be modified. But as such, I really try to invest in those additional tools selectively for my absolute favorites. Next question, what kind of tactile experience do you have with a tarot deck? What cardstock, method of shuffling you prefer, finish on the cards you prefer, etc. So cardstock isn't a big deal for me. I will use pretty much anything. That being said, I'm not the biggest fan of linen cardstock because it's very slippery and it gets everywhere. And I don't like that that's become the new standard, particularly for indie decks. My all-time favorite cardstock is the classic Lo Scarabeo cardstock. It's thin, but it retains its shape very well. This is the Etruscan Tarot, which, God, I don't know how old it is, but this is like almost 20 years old and is in pristine condition and is just absolutely fantastic. It's buttery, it's beautiful. I am a riffle shuffler, so being able to do a good bridge and have the deck perfectly retain its shape is important to me because shuffling is also very, very meditative. I read almost exclusively now with jumper cards. So having a good shuffle, being in the rhythm, being in the flow, knowing that a card is coming out because it is meant as a message, as opposed to because it's linen cardstock and the cards are going everywhere because they're too slick, is important to me. So that is kind of the method of shuffling that I prefer. But again, the tactile experience, it's more so in the repetitive meditative motion of shuffling and not necessarily the cardstock quality itself, if that makes sense. Next is, what other factors make a deck feel inviting for you to use? Internal consistency, colors, the type of conversation you have with the deck, its energy, etc. Ooh, this is interesting. So I'm going to address the first few parts of the question first. I think internal consistency is very important to me. I'm going to use the Fantastical Tarot as an example of this because I have the deck back in order. So having a really strong art style and really just emotive, evocative artwork is always a draw for me. And I do really like when there are parallels between cards. So here you have the Empress and the Emperor as a mirror of one another. You have the High Priestess and the Hierophant as mirrors of one another. You have elements of the Tower showing up in the Lovers, and then again in Death, getting closer and closer until you get to the Tower itself. Like those are really, really powerful for me. The Ludi Lescott is another deck that does that as well. The Mythical Goddess is another deck that does that as well, where there are callbacks, there are thematic elements, there are motifs that occur and create a real story and internal language that's unique to the deck beyond the standard symbolism that we would expect from tarot. So that is really, really important to me. Going back to the Mythical Goddess itself again, colors are very important. I like when decks are color-coded by suit because it makes it really beautiful to look at. I'm a bit of a magpie when it comes to color. And so I like being able to look at a spread at a glance and to know what element is present, to know what theme is going to be very strongly present. So that's another, I think, that ties into consistency as well. I think having kind of a strong color palette or strong elemental symbolism in between suits is really great. That makes me much more attracted to working with a deck. But again, my collection is so big, so I don't know if that would necessarily be the one thread that underlines all of my favorites. I very much follow my whims, and I work with whatever I feel very, very called to. And that brings me to the question of energy. I used to have a much more animistic view of my tarot decks and kind of treating them as, if not conscious entities, as having their own kind of intelligence. I think my view towards that has shifted. And the reason why is that I work with so many decks now at one time together. And I will draw the same exact cards from one deck as I will from the next deck. To me, when I'm connecting with tarot, I am connecting with something that is bigger than myself and with something that is able to communicate through many different decks. You know what I mean? There are some that, because of the nature of the art style, they are going to be more suited for some kind of readings over others. So what's a good example of that? I think if we're going to dip back into the Marielle for a second, the Marielle is a deck that is so complex in terms of its imagery and in terms of its occult symbolism that this would not be an everyday deck for me. I've really been using it for the Deck and Walk recently. I've used it for Rosh Hashanah, for Yom Kippur, for different really powerful moments during the Jewish holiday calendar as a point for self-reflection, but it's not one that I would go to every single day, just because the images don't really facilitate that for me. This is something that is entirely other than mundane day-to-day experience. And contrasting that with something like the Fantastical Tarot, where even though this does have a very strong artwork and aesthetic, this is something that I would use for day-to-day, and it's something that I've used for shadow work and regular work and relationship readings. Like, this is an all-around reader despite being so moody for me. But despite those differences in the artwork and despite those differences in what I use the decks for, I will draw the Chariot card from the Fantastical Tarot immediately after drawing the Chariot from the Marielle Tarot. You know what I mean? Like, they are different, and yet there is something that is the same that is speaking through them. And I've gone back and forth about what that is. If it is the collective unconsciousness, if it is my higher self, if it is the voices of my ancestors and my loved ones in spirit who have passed away before me. Right now, I'm leaning a bit more towards the latter, but that's because I'm doing a lot of very intentional ancestral work and reconnecting with those loved ones that I have not spoken to in a very long time before resuming my ancestral practice. And that's going to be for another video. But the point is, you know, do I think that decks each have a unique individual energy? Yes, but that's not what I'm communicating with when I'm reading tarot. So that was big. That was really big, but I've been wanting to outline that for a long time. So I appreciate Mixtress Rae for including that question within this video tag. The last question is, what does your tarot reading practice look like? Daily rituals, how you use your decks, etc. So I already kind of mentioned that a little bit, in that I have decks that I work with every single month as part of my goal of going through every single deck in my collection. I've spoken about that in quite a few videos. I just did a wrap-up video showing all of the decks that I worked with for the last quarter of the year, so I will leave that linked down below if you're interested in how that process came into being. In regards to daily rituals, I don't have very many anymore. I am going to be reading cards, if not at this table, everywhere I go. And I have the luxury of working from home. So right now, let me reach over here. I have the mini Rider-Waite-Smith tarot deck that is sitting on my desk right next to my work computer. And so I'm drawing cards from that either in between meetings or sometimes during meetings if they go for a very, very long time. I just have decks absolutely everywhere. And more often than not, I'm just picking them up and shuffling them and just laying it out. I do have these really beautiful vintage silk scarves that I've thrifted over the years. This is one of them. I also have some really nice, I can't remember what they're called, but like they're these really beautiful scarves that I got when I was living in Israel that are this nice thick blend, and those are really great because they don't move around as much as the silk scarves do while I'm shuffling. So I'll typically have part of the dining room table covered in that kind of cloth for kind of the bigger readings that I want to sit out and journal with and come back to multiple times over the course of a day or over the course of a week. But usually I'm just kind of like reading on the fly. Now, when it comes to bigger workings, this is when I am going to break out some additional spiritual tools. I'm going to get, again, kind of more into this later on, maybe a few videos down the line once I feel like I'm ready to share more about my ancestor practice. But that's really the only time that I am going to be using incense or candles. So this is the little incense burner that I have right now. It's this really beautiful peach terracotta glaze. It's in the shape of a crescent moon, as you can see. So I would be using that for those kinds of workings. Also, I have this really nice citrus and sage candle. I really enjoy sage and eucalyptus scents, and so that's what I gravitate towards. And I'm also going to be using candles for kind of those more formalized workings. And then for crystals, I really don't utilize crystals that much anymore, but some of the big ones that are important to me are calcite of all varieties. This is the first calcite crystal that I ever got, and it is absolutely electric. It's really, really great for charging up before doing a larger kind of ritual tarot working or a magical working. I also have this amazing honey calcite sphere, which has so many incredible rainbows and inclusions in it. It's just like a huge drop of sunshine and is really powerful. And I keep that in this bowl that my friend got for me when she went to Belize. I believe this is Huitzilopochtli, who is the sun god. So it just made sense to kind of store that there. And so this is also one that I will use, particularly with the Voyager Tarot, when I'm doing more intense workings with the Voyager Tarot. And then I also have been collecting rocks from important places. So this is one that I found in the creek behind my old apartment when I was still living in the DC area. And this is just really, really beautiful and magical for me. I have other rocks that I've gotten off of the coast of Maine when I go there to visit my family. I have rocks from the Arkansas River from where I live here in Oklahoma that are really great. I also, if I am going through a particularly tough time, I will use the smoky quartz point to help ground. So this is really great for doing shadow work readings or inner child readings, or just for kind of getting through the day, you know? And then citrine is really, really big. I use citrine a lot in my magical practice, particularly in conjunction with the Danny-Loft Tarot. And this is one of my absolute favorite pieces ever. This is my secret weapon. It is absolutely fantastic. I love this tower so much. And then on occasion, I have used my selenite wand to cleanse decks. I don't feel the need to do that anymore because, again, I don't kind of put as much stock in the individual deck itself anymore in the way that I used to. But this has been, when I've needed to cleanse a deck, I've known that I've needed to cleanse the deck, and I've used the selenite and it's always worked. So that's been really great. A few other things that I will like to have around. So you might have seen this in a few different videos. This is a really beautiful piece of clay pottery that one of my very dear friends made for me. And I have a lot of his other pottery around my home. I have mugs that he's done. I have vases that he's done. It's really, really great. And he's also made some pieces for my partner and for our family members as well. And then I think I'm gonna end this note on some animal allies. So coyote was the very first kind of animal spirit that I saw in meditations. And so I have this soapstone coyote carving. And then snake has really, really emerged as the big spiritual teacher for me. So I have soapstone snake carving. I also have a much larger golden snake statue that is on my table right now, but is just a little bit out of reach. And then I have these really beautiful prayer beads, and I will leave the link to the Etsy shop where I got them down below. These were actually intended to be Lilith prayer beads, and you have the sigil for Lilith here. But I don't really associate that with her. Like, this is really for snake. It has snake skin and it has rose petals in this jar here. And I use this as a pendulum, or sometimes, you know, I'll just wrap it around when I'm doing a reading to help ground. And this is really powerful. I might do another video too about snakes at some point, but man. Snakes are so good. Like I said, just some of the most powerful spiritual teachers I have had in my life. So really, really love working with them and always kind of having them around for larger working. And then I think I might have skipped one part of the fifth question, which is about the type of conversation you have with the deck. So I really will talk with my decks about anything, or rather will read about anything, and I exclusively use jumper cards because I know myself and I shuffle really, really well, and so I know that those are direct messages, and I very, very rarely, if ever, use spreads anymore, unless I am working with a deck that benefits from using spreads. And what I mean by that, if it's a deck that maybe is not internally consistent in its artwork, if it is a collaboration deck, then I find that having set spread positions are very helpful. But otherwise, it's completely intuitive. Whatever the first line of cards or whatever the first card is sets the tone for the reading. And like, sometimes I'll come to it with set questions, and sometimes I won't. And the first card or 2 or 3 cards that come out is the deck's immediate response, and then from there the conversation will branch out. And so I will either draw multiple cards kind of building off of this. I'm gonna use the Rider-Waite-Smith as an example. So let's say we have Judgment coming out, and so I'll be like, okay, like, what do I need to do in order to work with this energy of rebirth and awakening? We have the Hermit, Queen of Pentacles, High Priestess. Like, okay, let's go ahead and talk about this High Priestess energy. and so on and so forth. And it just builds off of one another. So I would say that it is like a very conversational style. And yeah, usually I have cards literally everywhere. It's absolutely crazy. So that is my answer to the invitations to a tarot practice video. If you've made it to the end of this, thank you so much for watching. This was really, really fun to talk about. I hope that this has given you deeper insight into my tarot practice. And if you have done this tag, or if you are interested in doing this tag, let me know, because I would absolutely love to hear about your own thoughts and experiences with these different elements of preparing and conducting tarot readings for yourself. As always, I am sending you much love and many blessings. Bye.